Hi, Stefan. Thanks for joining me. So I found your profile on LinkedIn, and I thought what you're up to is very interesting. So I thought I'd hit you up and find out a bit more. So could you tell us a bit about yourself and what you do?
Sure. French, as you can hear. I've been living in between Europe, the US, and Asia for the past 10 years. I'm a business guy, I don't code. And for the past 4 years now, I've been working on OpenVC, which is an online platform that connects founders and investors. And that's me in a nutshell, and happy to, dive into any direction.
OpenVC, you connect investors and founders. How big is the community at the moment, and when did you start the company?
So we started 4 years ago, and at the time it was a side project, right? So we launched for fun with Lucas, my co-founder, and really built it on nights and weekends for 2 years. We only went full time 2 years ago. Today, OpenVC is 6,000 investors strong, and every month we have 1,200 founders joining the platform and using OpenVC. So that's it's grown nicely. We're very happy about the volumes, and it allows us, to distribute deal flow across the world, really, from angel round to Series A. Pretty much any industry, we're gonna have founders and investors who can connect and do business together.
Well, one thing I noticed early on your website, what's the pricing structure for joining for the founders? I think I saw it was free. Is that correct?
Correct. So OpenVC is free to use for founders. 99% of the features are free. And then we have what we call a premium membership. So it's exactly like LinkedIn. Everybody's on LinkedIn for free, and most people get enough value from the free version. And then if you're a power user and you want advanced stuff, then you go premium. And with us right now, it costs $99 a month. And it's gonna give you, some advanced features. On the investor side, it's completely free. We have some ideas for a premium membership for investors, but for now it's free. And we don't take any success fee. We don't take any commission. We don't take any equity. We're really a pure, you could say SaaS model, if that makes sense.
Well, do you have any kind of like success rates? What or like case studies that have shown like how well some founders or investors have done?
Absolutely. So our job, like we said, connecting both sides. So this is what we measure. What we measure is when you connect with an investor through OpenVC, do they open, your pitch deck, and do they reply, and what do they reply? So this is what we track, right? So for the first half of the year, we were at 60% open rate. So you send 10 decks to investors on OpenVC, you're gonna get 6 of them opened. 40% reply rate for zero, and around 10% of what we call interested. So that's when they reply that they want to move forward, usually with a meeting. So this is the data we track. This is all on the platform, so we can accurately, measure what's happening. After that, it's not in our scope, right? We don't because we don't run the transactions. We're not a broker dealer or anything like that. So we do know that many deals have happened because people, message me and tell me, hey, we closed the deal with a startup we found on your platform. So that's really nice. But we don't have a full picture of what happens afterwards. But we have a few success stories, and actually, we're currently working on some testimonials that we'll put on the website.
I guess you must have a great insight seeing all the founders. What are the kind of latest trends, or what would you say are startups focusing on right now? I mean, I guess it's all AI, right? Or what can you share in terms of what the startups are actually doing?
Yeah, it's pretty much AI. There is this interesting mechanism that founders at some point understand that they can raise that the market wants something, and then suddenly those projects start appearing. So when investors wanted Web3 projects, suddenly there were a lot of Web3 projects, and now investors want AI stuff, and so there's a lot of AI stuff. So I don't know what comes first. Is it supply or demand? I'm not sure, but definitely there is a little bit of um, gaming the system type of thing where founders just create startups because they know they can raise for those categories. And so that's what happened.
Do you have an actual ability to see on your side kind of like the actual projects are? What's the quirkiest or most unusual project you've seen?
Oh, okay. So question one, yes, we have all the data. We see, what type of startups are raising. So, I mean, I don't have the data now, but I could open my dashboard and tell you, okay, we have N% of AI projects, whatever that is. The weirdest stuff. Uh, well, I guess the weirdest stuff is just stuff that is not fundable. Uh, we're a software company. We're an open platform, so anybody can sign up and join. Now, it doesn't mean that anybody can contact investors because we screen the deals and we block them when they're not relevant. So we protect investors from that point of view. But certainly, any project is free to sign up to OpenVC. And sometimes, we have some people building a gold mine in Zimbabwe, for example, or this kind of really eclectic stuff. And these are certainly good businesses, just not the kind of stuff we can deal with. So we tell them, hey guys, this looks great. Probably not a good fit for a Silicon Valley, tech investor. But yeah, that's the kind of funny things we come across from time to time.
And how do you find your investors? What's your marketing strategy to convince your investors to come onto your platform? How do they find out about your product?
That's a great question because the founder side is easy to get. Founders always want free stuff and investors. The investor side, it was a kind of three-step thing. So number one, when we launched, I manually added lots of investors myself. And some of the data there was not super accurate. And what happened is investors then reached out to me angrily, telling me, hey, why is there my name and my photo here and the data is wrong? So of course I apologize and hey, look, I'm sorry. Here's a link. You can claim the profile and update it yourself. And so there was a little bit of like, how do you say, anti-psychology, to get them to do what we want. That was step one. So step 0 was kind of filling it manually. Step 1, getting them to sign up themselves. And after that, it really just snowballs because when VC A sees that VC B is on the platform, VC A also wants to be on the platform. They move as as sheeps. It's very gregarious. So if they see that all their colleagues and all the other firms are on OpenVC, they want to be there as well, which is fantastic for us because we don't really have to sell them anything or push anything. And usually they find us on social media today. It's really LinkedIn and Twitter. These are our main channels for investor acquisition. Anything before Series A, it's just vibes. So, yeah.
And what, in your experience, what are the kind of key metrics or the key things you found that investors have kind of been looking into when they decide to kind of start collaborating with a startup? I mean, you mentioned earlier that a lot of times it might be because of a trend or a certain thing they're trying to like target, like Web3 or AI. Do you find investors have a very strict methodology after they've found like a Web3 company they want to invest in, or do you find no, it's more about the personal relationship rather than the metrics and data?
So every investor will have their own little process, their own little checklist. Some of them are extremely strict, If you take some, I don't know, German biotech investors, right? They're gonna be, cross the T's and
Right. Very engineer-like approach.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. But at the end of the day, despite everything, they will tell you that, they're unique and they have a very differentiated thesis or whatever. At the end of the day, it's always the same stuff. Number one, track record. So what have the founders done in the past that suggests they will be successful in the future? So, ideally they have a previous exit. It's rare, but these are profiles that they love. And if not, maybe they have worked at Google or Microsoft in a leadership position. Maybe they were early employees in a scale-up. Maybe they have, these kind of things. So that's track record. That's number one. Then number 2, traction, the second T. Do they have revenue? How fast is it growing? If not revenue, do they have users? How fast is that growing? And and what are the metrics that we can tie to future success? It's always about predicting success, but it's not science, and so you rely on heuristics. So track record, traction, and after that, it's a bit of everything. So, for example, trends, right? Is this a hot sector right now? But even if it's hot, you're going to have 10 hot startups in AI, all doing the same thing. So you go back to traction and track record. Intros and social capital and that stuff, it matters to access, like to get in front of the investor. But even then, you will not like get a check because you have an intro. You will get, 3 minutes of attention, and after that, it's like it is what it is.
Yeah, so the window of opportunity to present your project is actually very narrow, but your platform helps facilitate investors talking to startups. And how does the process look like from the perspective of the startup joining your platform? So they register and they create or they upload a pitch deck, and then the investors will start interacting with them. You mentioned there's a screening process. Could you tell us a bit more about what it's like for the investor side?
Absolutely. So on the founder side, you sign up, and first thing you're gonna do, you have a checklist, right? Upload your pitch deck, prepare your cold email, fill what we call the fundability test, right? We're gonna ask you 30 questions to understand exactly where you're at in your journey, what makes sense for you, generate an investor list. So like in 30 minutes, you're ready to raise. Or if you're not ready to raise, we're gonna tell you, and we'll tell you what you need to fix, right? That's the first step, the checklist. Then after that, you have your investor list. You can just see some investors accept intros, some investors accept cold outreach. We don't force anything. Everybody's free to do what they want. So when they accept cold outreach, you'd click submit deck and just send your deck to the investor with a little email. We screen that, and if it's good, we process it and it's sent to the investor. On the investor side, they receive notification, hey, Paul from whatever startup message you, sent you the deck, you open the deck, you like it, you don't like it, you just click a button, pass or fail, basically, as an investor. If you decline, you can add a little explanation, a bit of feedback. And if you like it, you can directly book a meeting in the Calendly of the founder. So we really try to streamline the process, right? Investors have very little time, very little attention. And so the best thing we can do is make it super easy for them to give a yes or no answer. What we're trying really to minimize is the ghosting. We're trying to minimize the no answer. It's better to have a quick no and maybe a bit of feedback than just no answer. So that's how it works. And after that, you guys, if the investor is interested, like I said, you're connected via email. He has your Calendly, and you can.
And these investors, do you find them mainly in North America? You mentioned earlier before I started recording that you are currently in China. Do you also have Chinese investors, or is it not compatible?
Very few Chinese investors are like that, but Chinese investors, I mean, China is a very different world, right? My wife is Chinese, so we spend a lot of time here. But OpenVC is probably not a good product for the Chinese market, in my opinion. It's a very different culture. Right now, it's 40% Europe, 40% US, well, US, Canada, and 20% rest of world. So on OpenVC, you'll find a lot of Western investors, let's say, US, France, Germany, UK, and then a little bit of Singapore, a little bit of Australia, a little bit of India, right? And a few Latin America and Africa. So that's the breakdown for us.
Right. And just out of curiosity, what would you say? What can you tell us about the kind of Chinese startup ecosystem? Because I've seen a lot of posts on LinkedIn, and it sounds very different, but also it does sound very dynamic. And in particular in Shanghai, I've heard there's a quite a large French kind of entrepreneur community.
Yeah. Okay, so some things you have heard in the past, it's a very dynamic and fast-growing ecosystem. And now, if you've seen the news in the past 10 days, it's all going down for many macroeconomic reasons. I would just point out that this article, I think it was the Financial Times or who was it, who had this graph with a tremendous collapse in Chinese startups created. The numbers are probably completely wrong in this graph. So just a little side note. So take this with a grain of salt because yes, I mean right now the market is not good at all for Chinese startups, but probably not as bad as what this article suggests. The Chinese ecosystem here. So you really have two ecosystems. You have the local, really Chinese one, and then you have the Chinese slash international startups. So startups that do cross-border payments, startups that do e-commerce, cross-border e-commerce. These are really two different worlds, right? Because in one space you only speak Chinese, in the other space you're more international, sometimes Americanized, and so that's gonna be really the first difference. Number two, um, in China they love hardware, they love biotech, they love deep tech, right? They love physical stuff. When in the West it's much more about software. But I think, and I don't know the exact reasons, but I suspect it's because people here don't pay for SaaS. So you cannot build $1 billion company selling subscriptions because people just don't pay for software. And
Interesting.
so that I guess that's half of the reason, kind of the more historical reason. And then you have the political reason, which is the government heavily supports and encourages hard tech. So if you're doing anything in chips, you're gonna get a lot of government support. If you're doing anything in, med tech, biotech, you're gonna have a lot of government support. And so people naturally move in that direction. So, a lot of Western investors would do SaaS and would stay away from hardware. China is kind of the opposite. And so for that reason, you also see a lot of people like when you speak with local tech entrepreneurs here, like their mind is a bit different from ours, right? They think in terms of, okay, I need a factory, I need a floor, I need inventory, and for them it's perfectly fine and normal, the for example, the headcount forecast is very different because they actually need people to build stuff when we don't. Well, we try to stay away from hardware stuff because it's just it's much harder. But doing those things in China is not as difficult as in the West. That would be number two. And then number three is just that the terms are less founder friendly. So it's very, I would say, I've seen that more than once in China, that the founder is expected to reimburse the VC personally if the
Wow.
company
Okay.
fails, right? This in the West would be considered, very bad practice, and people would just not accept it, right? They would
Mm,
roast you on LinkedIn and shame you and point fingers. But in China, it's very unbalanced, the power relationship between founders and investors. And so, yeah, it's not as clear cut, and founder friendly as it is in the West. And I think that's one of the great things typically in the US, where, investors really understand and accept that, okay, venture capital means there is a huge amount of risk, but it's acceptable, right? China still has some, I would say, and it's not general, it's just on average, I see a few more predatory behaviors, let's say, right? That you
mm.
probably wouldn't call out as much as you can in the West.
Interesting. So often an investment turns out to be a loan without you necessarily knowing.
Who knew, right?
Yeah.
But turns out, yeah, it was a loan. I didn't know it was not written, but it's
Yeah.
become a loan now.
Okay. So Stefan, you mentioned you're a kind of a digital nomad almost. You're living in between Europe and China. I'm kind of curious, what does your day-to-day look like? How do you organize your day? Is there like specific tools you like to use? Do you always work a fixed amount of hours? How does the practical day look like?
It has changed a lot, but now I guess it's pretty stable. I usually work from a Starbucks or Costa Coffee or something like that. I have my spots that I usually tweet about. When I found a new good spot, I retweet about it because I'm very happy. I have one more office space. Yeah, I spend, I don't know, usually 8 hours in front of my screen just on my laptop. And yeah, it's a pretty boring standard day. I wake up, head to Starbucks, sit down in the corner, plug the laptop, and just work. Take a little lunch break. Go for a nice thing in China, by the way. You can leave your laptop unattended for an hour. Go
Yeah,
for a walk. Nothing happens.
yeah. Same in Korea.
Yeah, yeah. You've been in Korea. You know how it is. This is really nice. Come back in the afternoon, put in another 3-4 hours, and then at this point, usually I take a little break, maybe dinner time, and if I have to, I work another 2-3 hours in the evening. So yeah, 8 to 12 hours of work per day. I try to. I mean, it's definitely more 12 than 8, but I try now. I try to go to the lower end if I can,
Mm.
just for personal balance and health. Right? Maybe I can do a little bit of sports instead, for example.
Do you make how do you keep track of your work? Do you make a to-do list or do you use like a note taking application or anything like that? Or do you literally just open your laptop and start firing off stuff?
I have a to-do list, which is super basic, just a list of things to do, and I just put one, two, or three for about the order of things, and that's like a long-term to-do list, right? So when let's say my co-founder tells me, "Oh, hey, you should do this or that," say, "Okay, cool." I just add one item in the list, and I put a number next to it. And so some stuff is never done, because it gets pushed down, to number 99 again and again. But it's fine. It's just the natural order of things. It's just, there are tasks I will never do in my lifetime. They are on this list. They will never be done. But it's okay. It's just a way to prioritize things. And then I use Google Calendar a lot. So I have Google Calendar for my day, and I just book 30-minute slots. And okay, I'll do this, I do that, I do that. I don't stick to it accurately, but it's still a good way to have control over my day. And because I'm in Asia, calls are a big thing because time zones. So I would have a bunch of calls in the morning and a bunch of calls in the evening, like
Mm,
7, 8 a.m., right? And then 8 p.m. Yeah, like
right. Cool. Well, thanks so much, Stefan. I think we can wrap things up. Is there any final words or anything you want to share before we hang up?
Uh, no, it was super nice. I guess the main thing is for founders who are raising, it's just not easy, and I just want to repeat that for people who could be doubting or feeling the pressure. Yeah, it's hard, and you know that it's hard because people tell you it's hard, but it's even harder than you think when you're. But it's just the way it is, and yeah, check out OpenVC if it can help. We have a lot of free tools and free resource to support the journey.
Awesome.